Раді вітати вас на лабораторії створення документальних VR-фільмів, яка народилась у Харкові як фестиваль Documentaries. Мене звати Оксана Сигарова, я кураторка лабораторії. Поруч зі мною Марія Степанюк, яка є координаторкою.
Ми дуже раді, що саме Documentaries доєднався до її реалізації, як місце сили документалістів країни. Саме для них ми створили цю лабораторію, але насправді вона буде доречна спеціалістам з різних сфер.
Лабораторія пропонує 6 кроків зі створення VR-фільмів, від розробки історії до промоції та дистрибуції. Для цього ми запросили 6 спеціалістів прочитати лекції на прикладах з їх практики. Головна задача лабораторії – розширити інструментарій документального кіно через залучення можливостей віртуальної реальності.
Ми сподіваємось, що, прослухавши всі лекції, вам буде легше йти на територію VR, і після лабораторії з'явиться більше історій мовою віртуальної реальності. Сьогодні ми дуже раді познайомити вас з Сönке Kirchhofом та його професійним дослідницько-інженерним шляхом. Сönке вивчав політичні науки у Гамбурзькому університеті та кіно і телевиробництво в кіноуніверситеті Бабельсбургу. Пройшов шлях від заснування перших інтернет-телевізійних станцій в Німеччині в 2005 році до створення InVR Space, студії, що спеціалізується на відео 360, VR, AR, MR.
Продюсер, режисер, стереограф та консультант Сönke Kirchhof поділиться досвідом та надасть огляд творчих аспектів, а також технічні рекомендації для майбутніх проєктів, побудованих на різних цифрових платформах. Протягом лекції ви можете ставити питання в чатах. У нас буде час розібрати їх після лекції. А ті, хто присутні в Zoom, матимуть можливість задати питання наживо. Вітаємо, Сönke!
So that was it. Hello, everybody, and thanks for having me here. Unfortunately, I could not understand one word beside my name in the video, but at least it looked great. It looked funny. So at a certain point, you have to translate to me what was on the sound level. So yeah, my name is Sönke Kirchhof. I'm CEO of InVR Space. We are a Berlin and Munich-based company. Our headquarters are in Berlin, Germany. Doing all kinds of virtual reality content, not only content, but mostly we are, as a full service studio, doing content. We do not focus too much on specific genres or formats, but we do a lot of documentaries, and that's why I'm talking about this here today. Beside documentary stuff, 360 video, we are working on narrative, fictional pieces, but as well on art pieces that perhaps don't really fit into any genre, that is very VR related, very VR specific, that perhaps premieres at the last Venice Biennales. We had 2 projects, 2 art pieces, and then we do a little bit of commercial work, of course, to pay the rent. And, beside that, we do a little bit of AR projection mapping and these kind of immersive video works. And in the interactive field, we are developing a dance game, for example. We already developed one, and this is our second game now. But as well, more industrial interactive applications as well. And last but not least, we offer a platform. We have the tools for that a little bit longer, but we offer it since the beginning of the pandemic, when all festivals and conferences could not open doors in reality anymore. We recognized that the festivals we partnered with before now needed a solution to go virtual. And so we partner with festivals like the London Film Festival at the British Film Institute last year, or Stereopsia as a not really a festival, but more a conference on VR and stereoscopic 3D topics, or immersive media topics, as well as the VRAM, for example, the VR Ham that is partnering with this institution here as well. to give them the option of opening doors virtually and invite people to watch the virtual world, the virtual reality worlds in a VR headset, or if you don't have one, even on a laptop like a Windows or a Mac machine. So yeah, as said, we are working very broadly in the field of virtual reality because we try to explore that medium, and as it's a new medium, there's a lot to explore and to learn and to figure out. So that's basically what we do. Perhaps first of all, I try to show the show reel, and if that works, then I go deeper into projects. I have to start from the beginning, so if it starts from the beginning. So back again to reality. Yeah, so that was of course, as showreels are, a broad overview about a little bit of everything that we're doing. As you could see, there is documentary inside, but there is as well volumetric capture and completely different stuff. Interesting wise, documentaries have been, from our recognition, one of the first genres or formats that we could have seen in virtual reality. When the first VR headsets of this generation, of course, I'm not talking about the 80s, but from the last 6-7 years, when it started again with the Oculus DK development kits, for example, or the Google Cardboards that came to the market. We recognized very early that there's a lot of documentary filmmakers interested in this medium, and pretty quickly there was a very broad selection of VR documentaries. For example, filmmakers like Chris Milk, within, for example, started a platform with a lot of documentary content. A project called Clouds Over Sudra, I think, was one of the first documentaries that received some awards and quite some recognition and gained some interest for the medium as well. And that's very interesting, as that's our recognition as well, that of course you find some, and right now it's all of the people who have a VR headset are early adopters in a way. And most of them are coming from the gaming perspective, but there's a lot of artists as well. And all of them seem to have a hunger or a need for watching documentaries or producing documentaries and bringing these topics out in the world. And there are definitely several ways why this medium is useful for that and could be used very well for that. One of them is that at least in the beginning, all filmmakers who worked in 360 video tried to bring the viewer into a specific perspective. And so the camera has been the user, the viewer in the end. And like that, and as we encountered issues, for example, with quick movement of the camera, and it ended up, or it still ends up in something called motion sickness for the viewer, it was very useful to put the camera just on a tripod and put it somewhere and let it stand there and record for a while, and not edit too fast as well in the end. And of course, this is kind of ideal for documenting something, to put a camera on a specific place and let it run for a while and just observe what is happening in front of the camera and what is happening not only into one direction, but in 360 degree. So we recognized pretty soon a lot of documentaries from very sad topics like the refugee crisis and shot in refugee camps, picking up stories from refugees. But as well, we've seen a lot of wildlife documentaries, for example, as well. So it was obvious that there is a need of telling stories from places where not everybody could go to, or not everybody would go to. Or, for example, for the wildlife things, to place a camera in situations where you would not bring yourself into, or where animals, for example, get interested in the camera after a while, but you would have to lie there for a bunch of hours until these animals would come that close to you. So there were shots gained that you can perceive on a VR headset as if you would be there, but in situations with animals, for example, that would be never possible in reality. So there's a lot of, and these are just 2 examples or 3 examples of why documentaries had been available pretty early on this medium. The interesting side is that for standard cinema and TV, we have an issue with documentaries. Less and less broadcast stations are interested in document, at least for Germany. I don't know how it's where you live, but here in Germany and around in France and so on, we encounter that it's getting harder and harder to bring your documentaries into cinema, and that it's kind of impossible to earn money with that or to recoup your costs with that. And so documentaries that come into cinema perhaps will be there on a Thursday when the cinema week starts, but they'll already disappear on a Friday or on a Saturday because big blockbusters are much more interesting and earn much more money on the box office. So in VR, there is not a real market right now. There are a lot of platforms. There is a lot of interest from different players, but there's not really a market like an established cinema market or a broadcast industry like that. But there are, for example, some platforms from newspapers or from general media that has always been dealing with journalistic content, for example. And that's where documentaries get interesting in a way, if they are on specific topics, if they are shot in a specific way that is useful, for example, for these newspapers, to show it to a world on a more distribution professional distribution way than just sharing it on festivals or just sharing it by sending out retransfer links, for example, or putting it for free on YouTube. So the interesting point is that not only very early days in this VR generation, in the new wave, the third wave, there was a lot of interest for VR documentaries. There seems to be even a market and a better potential in some regards than for standard documentaries that are framed 16:9, because they approach topics different on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's not that overloaded yet. It's still, in a way, it feels still like you find what you're looking for if you know where to look at these kind of projects. Like if you look for content that is what you expect from New York Times, you'll definitely find something on New York Times. And if you know about Chris Milk and how he did his documentaries, you'll find the stuff online. Same is for Arte, for example. Arte had a 360 platform or 360 website online for a while with a lot of very good documentaries, but as well art pieces. And I think 90% of the people who visited their website found there exactly what they expected. So that's pretty easy if you know where to look at. Same is happening with Oculus TV. They have a little bit more a broader approach. They put everything in there that is suitable regarding technical aspects, but as well, of course, the content itself. But it's less curated, I would say. So you would perhaps have to search a little bit more for what you're looking, but you'll find an enormous amount of content there already in a quality that is viewable, let's say like that. That's not always the case. So and coming to the viewable aspect, of course, in documentaries, in a normal film world, we struggle with budgets, and so we sometimes struggle with finding the right technology for shooting a documentary. From the one angle, like specific cameras might be too cost intensive, lenses and so on. So there's a lot of things involved sometimes that maybe are not in budget. But of course, it's not only about shooting, but as well about post-production though. And the other way around is that, of course, in some documentary fields, you need special equipment. You cannot just go there with a standard camera because it might be much too big, for example. There is this established image speech of like having shoulder cameras, for example, in documentaries, which is not possible like that in VR. So there are some technical constraints as well that you have to think about when you're shooting a documentary in VR. So on top of the regular post-production that you would do in 16:9, there comes some additional processes to that, which is, for example, called the stitching process, where you have to bring together the images, the videos from the separate lenses in a camera, like, for example, Insta or Kandao, where you have 6 lenses in one body, and you have to stitch it together in the end to one sphere. So saying that, it all starts with figuring out what's the story on one hand, and that's a classic process in documentary and in journalism. What's the target group, and where do you find that target group? Is that something that you will expect rather on the New York Times or on Oculus TV or somewhere else? So would it make sense to approach this platform in the beginning already or before shooting and ask them about a contribution, about the co-production, about support at least? And on the other hand, on what's their specific needs in regards of tech, because we see that with a very fast pace, for example, resolutions are changing. And so something you produce right now in a resolution that is okay, that is perhaps not top notch, but definitely the standard for most devices, might be outdated next year when you finish the documentary. So what we see already with some platforms is that they did not care too much about if it's 2D or 3D a while ago, and a pixel resolution of a little bit less than 4K, 3840 by 1920 per eye, for example, was totally okay. And now it starts that we are hearing this is not suitable anymore. We need 4K plus in resolution, and we need stereoscopic 3D and no more 2D, and so on and so on. So more and more aspects are developing as well. So this is something that definitely makes sense to figure out beforehand, and then choose wisely what kind of equipment you can use in the field to to gain the images that you need to collect the story that you want to tell. Because on the one hand, an Insta-Titan might be resolution-wise the right camera, but size-wise perhaps not the right camera, and budget-wise even less, because it's one of the most expensive cameras out there, and it weighs about 15 kilograms, and it's not a camera that you just stick to a helmet on your head and can run out there in the field with that camera on your head, which would be rather something that you would collect with a GoPro, for example. But then you start tapping into the field of the consumer cameras, where you will not gain stereoscopic 3D images, for example, but only 2D. So it's, again, the question, like you would always have to answer yourself in the beginning, what's the right equipment for me to catch the story, to shoot the documentary the way I want to not disturb, for example, with big equipment, to be flexible as much as possible in the field, and not bound to heavy equipment or very cost-intensive equipment. Does it have to be rugged in the field? Like, again, back to the wildlife stuff, can I put it into the field for 3 days, just standing there? And can I remotely push a record button, or can I record for 3 days continuously and save the data to a hard drive that is external to it? Is it rugged enough that if it starts raining, for example, that it still continues to work? All these questions are questions that have to be asked and can be answered already much better than 2 years ago, when there was a very limited amount of cameras out there. But at the same moment, when you find more cameras there, of course, you can tap into the problem that you selected the wrong one, for example, because it was cheap, or it was sitting in your shelf, and you could use it like that, but didn't produce the resolution or the frame rates or the stereoscopic images that you would need for distribution in the end. So saying that, I think I should continue with the second video about, that's it. Oh, okay. As always, pop up. Let's see if that works like this.
Guys, human rights. Don't shoot me. Yuba Mountains, Sudan. How does it feel to fight against your own government? Transnistria, visit a state. Abandoned places due to economic isolation or war. Protected by a Congolese warlord, caged in the endless circle of at Europe's borders, the wars. Are we? Was it time to break free? Witness the South Sudanese exodus. Experience history yourself. It's your world.
Right, so I put the link to this one into the chat here, so you can take a look at it afterwards. As it is 360, you can swivel around by using your mouse. Oh, it might be that this is already the next video one. So I didn't do that too much right now during the video, but you can swivel around with the mouse with the 360 sphere.
Die.
Let's check the mode. Oh, that's the right thing. Right. So as you could see, it's very different situations, very different environments. Julia Leb, the journalist that we worked with on this project, or who shot this project, and we worked on the post-production with her and creating an app out of this, traveled around the world to different places that are not recognized by the world, or forgotten places, for example, war-torn regions, but as well like Colonia Dignidad, just a very special place that is not recognized anymore in the world. So by doing that, of course, she traveled with very small equipment and equipment that you could set up very easily, very quickly in the field. And even if it would be broken or stolen or something, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Which means, of course, we have only 2D images in this project. That doesn't matter too much, because here it's really about the story and not about the visual storytelling. As the camera was placed where it could be placed, often it was not done under regards of taking care about the proper stitching process or being able to stitch the images properly in the post-production. So you encounter issues in the stitching in the end. As well as there are some shots where, for example, one camera didn't record properly, so we only have an angle of 180 degree, and so on, or had to take out one slice because it was not stitchable. So like that, you end up with a mix of video files that perhaps might not look anymore like suitable for VR headsets or something that is appealing in regards, or if you want to compare it to high-end projects in VR. But if the story is important, or if the story does not really need the whole visual quality, it might still work in VR, because people are, how to say, they are aware that stitching is not that easy, that some cameras will give you a headache in this process. And they are much more into the story itself, or into the storytelling element in the documentary than in the technology used, until it starts to hurt in your eyes. And then in that moment, of course, you cannot ignore the technology anymore. Then you deal with the technology, and that's something which is very, how to say, counterproductive when you're dealing with people who are into documentaries, into journalistic aspects, and not so much into technology. They do not want to deal with technology or struggle with the headset, and that's the immediate moment when you bring them out of the storytelling element. So again, try to avoid it as much as possible, but keep in mind to also shoot what you can shoot in the field, even if you are not 100% sure if that will end up in the final product, or if it only ends up if you have to approach it a little bit more creatively in regards of how to fix an image in the end. So it does not necessarily always have to be 360 image, for example. You can cut out certain parts of the sphere and fill it with other informations, or fill it with just with black. So yeah, this project was quite recognized in festivals, but as it is a very journalistic piece, and a very journalistic piece that supports Julia Leb's other work, which is more like photography and writing, it was never really distributed in an international distribution chain like that. But nobody knows, as it's topics and areas in the world that are still existing the same way. It could always happen, and that's funny as well. That as long as the quality is a little bit future-proof, things seem not to get old in the field of VR right now. We got a lot of requests from Facebook, for example, for Oculus TV, from projects that had to be already through with the whole festival and so on distribution. So it is part of the distribution right now for platforms to look for content that is high quality, that is old enough, that it already perhaps was distributed in certain areas or is already done with festivals and has all the laurels on it. So it's easier to promote these projects and to distribute them now as non-new content. So this is something that starts right now as well. On the other side, we of course try to make some work in more, how to say, entertaining fields of the documentary. So we shot during 2 years ago during 2019 a project called African Space Makers in Nairobi. That is more considered as a mockumentary than a documentary, but it has a lot of documentary elements in there. As we visited different artists in Nairobi, artist groups, and they told the story to us as a viewer. So we established the camera as a film director who is visiting these artist groups together with a small documentary film team. In the beginning of the project, you choose if you would be male or female. So the resonance you get, the feedback or how the people talk to you is according to your gender in a way. So that's how we implemented a narrative element in there on the one hand, but as well some interactive elements, some interactivity into a documentary piece. So you go with your small film team, with your documentary film team to these artist groups. You can decide to whom you want to go out of 7 groups, and then listen to their story, what they are doing, how they went to do that. It's artist group that produce cut juice, for example, as cut is legal in Kenya, and sell it in bars or discotheques, for example, instead of alcohol. It's other artist groups that dig in thrown away fashion parts and create new fashion out of it. It's other artist groups that use a parking place, a huge parking lot in the middle of Nairobi, at the weekends when no cars are parked there because the shops are closed, as a skating park. So it's like a little microcosmos that started there with someone is renting out skates, someone is teaching skates, someone is selling juice and food for the people who are exhausted. So it's a completely small ecosystem that is happening there on the weekends that cannot happen there on the weekdays. So these artists are telling you how they had the idea, how they are coping with the situation, what kind of troubles they are running into, like do they worry about getting kicked out of the parking space, for example, soon. And so you have at specific points in this documentary always the option to choose between different options. Like in real life, you say like, okay, I want to listen further to a story, or I'm not interested at all, I move on to the next protagonist. I will support this artist with some money, and you'll get reactions out of that, and the story will continue in a different way. Of course, this is interactivity that is based on shots that we had to shoot before, and so you only have a very specific decision between 2, 3, or 4 different options that lead to other videos that we shot before. And we call it a mockumentary because, of course, like some reactions and the gender-based reactions, of course, are scripted or have been scripted. But in the end, it is a documentary, as all these artist groups tell their real story and tell the reality about their troubles they are going through in a very entertaining way. And I think that's a good time to show that trailer. I closed it here. I think I have to reopen it. So I'll share my screen again.
It was us telling our stories. They did not come up with a script for us. It was us saying what we think, what we feel, what we've experienced, and then them converting that into a VR experience.
I wanted to talk about spaces, and I thought the 360 camera, the virtual reality, gives you that opportunity to go through storytelling, but instead of going through characters, you go through spaces. So the space becomes now the character. That's how we ended up in VR.
This was my first time participating in anything VR related with regards to being in the experience.
I think as soon as I saw the script, I was sold. I was just like, so when are we starting this and how do we do this?
When I read his general concepts, I thought it was brilliant because he was creating an awareness, shooting like 360 for the first time. And we were going to do some things that we had never done before.
Because most people that even do VR only do like maybe short videos of probably 2 to 5 minutes.
It's like a crash course of Nairobi in like 15 minutes.
Kila space iko na concept yao. Na sana nafurahi sana kwa concept ya kila mmoja ikiwa kwa pamoja hivyo vile nimesema.
The journey starts in Nairobi, here where we are at the bus. You can be either a male or a female, and you experience everything from the perspective.
This is interesting because aside from the introduction, you don't really see me because the point of view is mine.
It's an immersive thing. Then now you get to experience the space as it is. That's the best thing about the space makers.
There's 360 movements. Like the camera is at the center, there's something happening at the front, there's something happening at the back. You become the camera when you're watching a 360 experience. And the camera in our case was the director.
You are at this workshop about urban storytelling. You've been given a mission, now you have to go out and document 5 spaces around Nairobi.
You feel like you're inside with the crew and the adrenaline rush. It was
Let's say for our episode, yeah, you get to experience news as it was. Yeah, you get to experience Chester House as it was. Everything from the top floor to the party over there. Like it's some of the best ways to actually explain such a concept, because you get to immerse someone inside the space. That's all African Space Makers about. Like it's you immersing yourself into the space. So I feel like VR was the best idea to do this project.
Which is not a film, by the way. It's a journey or / an experience. The whole African Space Maker idea is very conceptual. It's not that you are getting inside the real matter, you are getting in this like empty room. Once you are there, you choose where you want to go. You can choose 5 different spaces. But now one of these spaces you can only go if you have done all the other spaces.
Once you choose and you go with the thing that you choose. And if you want to choose another path, you have to go back and start all over again so that you can get to that point, so that you can be able to choose the other thing that you were not able to choose. So I found that really interesting.
Sometimes they are fake choices. You cannot really choose.
He was packaging like something that could make relevant stakeholders aware of the potential of the creative sector. They were not experts in everything overall, so there was a lot of collaboration involved.
The collaboration between us, Black Rhino VR and in VR Space, there could not have been African Space Makers without this collaboration, and all the partners involved know this very well.
I would say my favorite episode was the Java Juice episode. It put me in spaces that I'm very familiar with already. The Java crew actually gave us Java Juice to try. Yo.
It shows the party life of Nairobi. With African Space Makers, you get to experience all these in an hour.
I know it's almost counterintuitive because it's giving people the ability to experience the spaces without having to leave their houses. But on the flip side, from how I felt about it, it feels like the kind of thing that would excite me into actually going to experience it.
And that's just speaking about Kenya. Like now, if you take like Africa as a whole, like whoa, there's so much that can be done.
Just a quick tip though, ladies. If you're going to watch something that requires you to wear VR goggles, don't wear makeup because you will transfer all your makeup onto the glasses.
So, back here. So as you could see there as well, I mean, we had to use some different cameras. For example, we shot most of it on a Kandao to have state-of-the-art 360 3D images in the end. But for example, we had this small scene on the skate park, on the parking lot, where we had to put a camera on the helmet to have some moving shots out of the perspective of a skater, as well as some drone shots where we had to put a small GoPro under the drone. So that's what I wanted to express as well. It's totally okay to mix some material if they add something to the story, and if there's short elements in 2D, for example, but the rest is stereoscopic 3D. If it's motivated by the story, or if it's due to technical constraints, then it's totally okay to think in that direction. And even if I normally would not recommend going into the field of tapping into the field of consumer 360 cameras like the GoPro Fusion or the Samsung Gear 360 camera that was available for a while. Sometimes they can produce very high level image quality and are easy to use, and as they are like some of them are already outdated and a little bit older, you find them very cheap on eBay or somewhere in the internet, and can start shooting something with that, or shoot stuff that you would not shoot with a more expensive camera. So I want just to emphasize using these cameras if they are useful, if they are needed, or if you can't do something without them. But think about if that's the right equipment to go for a whole project or a project that you want to distribute later. But it's totally okay to use it partially in projects. So then I think you have Felix and Gayatri as well here as speakers. So I don't have to go too deep into this project, into Kusunda. I think I can share the screen, show at least the website, so you have a little bit of a feeling what I'm talking about. So this is a project that we co-produced together with Noye Media. Gayatri and Felix have they been here already, or do they? Yeah, they have. Okay, so I assume they talked already a little bit about this project. Sometimes it's getting a little bit hard to define if it's still a documentary or not, but I would consider it as a journalistic or a documentary project here. But I'm saying this because there's a lot of technology involved that is not at all a camera, or that doesn't feel like a documentary that is documented with a camera, as the protagonists, for example, have been captured with Microsoft Azure cameras. So they are at least partially volumetric captures. There's a lot of photogrammetry of the environments involved, and there's a lot of animation work involved. And of course, we know animated documentaries like Waltz with Bashir and so on as well. But what I want to express with this project is that you can approach documentary topics or journalistic topics very good and very legit in VR with different technology than shooting with a camera, if that's the right style for your story. Try to approach this medium as well as a new medium and think about new ways of storytelling and the right equipment for doing that when you want to tell a story, and it's not obviously given how you would do that, and you don't have the stuff at hand. It's totally legit, and I think people out there appreciate very much if you are creative enough to have different ideas or other approaches than just going out there with a camera. So yeah, you have a little bit of an idea of the volumetric captures, for example, and the visual style that you can find in there, photogrammetry of the house and so on. Right. So at this point, as I do not know you as my audience here, I would love to open it up a little bit for questions, because otherwise we are running into the end of this session, and I didn't leave any time for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me. And I think I can post the link in the meantime to the African Space Makers as well. Any questions? Any projects that you want to tell me about and ask about how to approach it, for example, or any experiences you have that you want to share?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, just a little moment. Hello, thank you for the information. Actually, I would like to kind of ask your maybe tip experience, as I have no experience in VR for now and 360, but I'm very curious about that. And I'm in the process of preparation of my first small experiment in a document using a 360 in the documentary. And I actually, the idea is to observe my character on the first place from the point of view of the people around, and then to experience the same situation from the point of view of the character. And actually, I'm asking myself a question: how to make this transition the best way, and how to guide the audience, so the audience, the person who's watching it after is not confused and understand what happened.
Right.
So maybe you can give me some or share some tips or ideas about that, as I'm just in the process right now of preparation.
Understand. I hope I understood the question right. If not, interrupt me and guide me into another direction. But I think a good approach, or something that always makes sense in VR, is considering, on the one hand, that how would it be in reality. So if you would switch just without any hint, any interactivity into another's position, it would be weird. It would be odd. Yeah. So try to make it clear why you are jumping, or make it an interactive decision of the viewer in a way. And that's as you're asking this question, funny wise, the background I'm using here comes from a project that might be that might give some correlations. So what you can see in the background, there are some benches, and as you perhaps even recognize, there are, like, above my head here in this area, it's not 100% proper stitch. It is due to the fact it was a documentary we shot about 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and we didn't have a 360 camera back in the days, and they have not been publicly available like that. So we just used the stereoscopic camera setup that I had from my stereoscopic work, and interviewed people. It was on a conference, normally a conference on VFX, but it was the first time that they invited 5, 6, 7 speakers from all over the world, from the field of VR. That was when the third wave of VR started, in a way. So we thought, okay, that's interesting. So let's interview these guys about their vision on VR, and let's just capture the material first, and then see what we can make out of it. It would be a shame if we don't use that opportunity. So we shot these guys on one of these benches with a stereoscopic camera pair. And then we had to stitch together the background, as you can see, to make it a sphere. And all of them have been sitting on the bench and just talking into the camera, which is something that you normally would not do in a narrative work as well. That's, I want to mention that earlier, just not to forget that. It's very important that they address the camera, that you have the feeling afterwards that they are talking to you. And then we recognize, of course, it's totally odd if they are all speaking at the same time. So we put it into Unity and added the interactive element that if you're looking at someone here, you're standing in the middle or sitting in the middle of this circle of people watching at you, and only one is talking. That's the one that you're looking at. And in the moment when you are swiveling around, you look at someone else at 90-degree right of you, for example, that person that talked to you fades out slowly, and the other one starts speaking. So we always loop the situation when they have not been talking, that they have not been there as a still, because it looks not appealing as well. So it looked like they are sitting there and listening to the other people, and when you look at them for a while, they start talking to you. That's how it was motivated. So you even if you didn't do it on purpose, you recognize, I'm looking to someone, and then he starts speaking to me. And if you do it 3 or 4 times, you recognize, that's always happening. And that's like logic, because it's happening in reality as well. If I look away from someone who's talking to me, he might stop talking to me. And if I look at someone, if I'm in a group and I look at someone else who starts talking at the same time, one person will perhaps stop talking because he recognizes that no one is listening to him anymore, while the other person continues talking because everybody's looking to them and listening to them. So these kind of interactive elements might be one option, one solution for your question on how to switch perspectives as well. If you look at people, and they interact with you in a verbal way, for example, and you look at them and then you switch into their point of view, it is clear where you have been switching to right now, and perhaps due to the speech level, it is motivated to that on another level as well. So it's double clear why you switch the perspective now. That can be done through interactivity, through obvious interactivity, like if you do it through gaze control, that this blue ring, for example, closes. That's things that people already know from VR and from gaze control. So in that moment, it's already clear for them, something will happen when the ring is closed, and they are already like expecting something like that. But you can do it as well on a very, like here in this project, we try to avoid that, so that we have no visual
distractions.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't want to make it on a more subconscious level, or however you would say. So that's something you have to play around with, and that's definitely important in VR anyway, and even more if it's one of your first projects. But we still do it after dozens of projects we worked on, to let that experience by other people who have not been involved in the project, to have some of them should have a little bit of experience with VR headsets, and some should be first time using the VR headset if you have some of them in your environment, because people who are used to VR, they will not be that disturbed from the wow effect that most of the people who have a VR headset on the first time are experiencing the stuff completely different than people who are using it daily. So that's why I'm encouraging you to show it to different kind of people, to not get and only feedback from people who are totally in the wow effect of the medium because it's their first time, but perhaps go a little bit more technically in there. But as well, you can get a lot of feedback from the people who are used to VR. Then it's a very technical detail, and they looked very focused, for example, on stuff that only them would recognize because they are used to it already, and other people would not have recognized at all. So, but by doing that, you will get a lot of feedback on how natural it feels that the perspective was switched, and if it was, for example, too fast or not motivated enough, that it was not understandable. But that's one thing how I would encourage you to bring it into on a contact level on one hand, and to make it in a way as you would expect it in reality as well. That's something that I think is quite important. It is virtual reality, and so the more you are working in a documentary field or journalistic field, the people are expecting something as it would be in reality, and that it captures reality as well, unless you really want to bring it on an artistic level. But then it has to be clear for them, or it has to get clear during the story that this should be artificial, or that this is creatively interpretation of reality or something like that. For certain reasons, for several reasons, but I encourage you to first think, how would it be in reality? And then if you have this established, or if this is thought through, then take all the reality thing and throw it away and think about, like, how would you do it in a virtual reality and make it appealing that it's happening in this medium? Because of course, it's like always, there are people asking, why should you do that in virtual reality? No, you could have told the story for TV or cinema as well. Why should you do it in VR? I would not answer that question, because the good answer is always because I wanted to do it in 360 or in VR. But of course, you have to ask yourself why you are doing that in a way, and how you could use that medium in an appealing way that is only possible in that medium without making it too tech-driven in a way. So that's the long answer on your question. I hope I addressed the question in a proper way on how to switch the or how to approach this question to switch.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, the goal is, the truth is that the goal of the project is actually to experience the world, a little bit of life from the perspective of my protagonist, of the character. But I think just going directly there maybe wouldn't be strong enough, or like wouldn't be that you know. I think passing from the normal person on the street, or like in the public transport, for example, who's watching this character who looks different, would make more sense after to go in the skin of the character. So that was kind of the idea. But thank you very much. I think yeah, you gave me some interesting thoughts to think about. Yeah, and also another question, if we still have time, and you touched this already, that actually you did experience already putting the camera on the person and moving like with the skateboards and stuff like that. So, but I heard before that it can cause like a physical uncomfort for the audience if you are not walking, but you experience like walking. So is it something of a big deal, or it's kind of it could be tried?
It should be tried. If it's part of your story, if it's important for your story, then you definitely should do that. So that's, you can answer this question from different angles, and while doing that, you'll find out that there is not a real answer on that, not a yes or no or something like this. So generally, yes, there is this issue of motion sickness. That's how it's called, and it comes from different reasons, and it can be tackled by different ways. So one thing is, it is individual. Some people are more stressed by that and some are not at all. Then it is a matter of routine. If you're used to VR, you will not deal that much with motion sickness than you perhaps did in the beginning. Or the motion sickness is impacting you so much that you decided not to use VR headsets anymore. I even know people who decided for this way. But that's the same thing you'll figure out with stereoscopic 3D movies. Some are sitting there totally relaxed, enjoying the depth and so on, and others are sitting there and saying like, wow, that's much too much depth, and I have to roll my eyes all the time and so on. So and getting a headache. So this is a very individual thing based on different factors, like that our senses are connected, like ears and eyes and so on. And that works differently for each person. Some people are more sensitive to noise, for example. So that's given here as well. Then it is connected to technical aspects like motion blur, for example. If you're shooting with a very low frame rate, you will, like low frame rates in VR are already frame rates like 30 frames per second. And you are moving not very slow, but faster than slow. The motion blur will come more and more an issue here, because I mean, I think I don't have to go deeper into the question of what motion blur is and so on, but the more you reduce the image quality with these kind of artifacts, the more it'll get an issue for everybody. Even if they don't recognize that it's for that reason, they recognize they get sick, they you know, like this. Then, so that can be, for example, solved by using a camera with 90 frames, 60 frames, but that depends again very much on how much movement is there, what speed of the camera is used. If it's a very slow speed, perhaps you get along with 30 frames per second. If it's more speed, then you should think about higher frame rates. But then we are coming to the creative aspect, that it should be motivated in the image again. Like for example, we worked, or we still work a lot with the automotive industry, where you always have moving cars. You cannot shoot a car commercial without a moving car, and it's not the case that everybody is getting sick immediately when the car is moving, because it is motivated in the image. It is clear when you're sitting on the driver's seat or next to the driver, and you're looking to the driver and you tell them, no, we are driving to the beach, and the car starts moving slowly. it's totally okay for your brain to connect the ears and the eyes in a way, we should be moving and we are sitting in a car. So that our brain can deal with a lot of things when the brain gets an explanation for that's happening right now. Of course, again, very individually. But if you're motivating things like that, then it helps a lot to get not into this problem. And then still you have to deal with a percentage of people who are sensitive on that. You will even have to deal with a percentage of people who cannot cope with VR at all, even in a static shot. So you have to take that issue serious, but you can tackle it from different angles, like creative angles and technical level angles and storytelling angles, to solve it as much as possible. And then you have like the shots like we had on the skater and the skater park, for example, where it works completely. And if it's only a short one, I mean, sometimes it might be even part of the concept that people feel a little bit dizzy because the protagonist feels dizzy in that moment. Then you can support it like that. It's you have to just think about what are you doing with that psychologically as well, and it might be even helpful to support what you want to give to the people. And if you do not force the people to stay in something uncomfortable for a minute, but only for 15 seconds, for example, it might be suitable as well. If this is over, in the moment when they recognize, oh, it makes me feel dizzy, and in the moment before they start thinking about putting off the headset or not, they are already in a different shot, then it might work as well. So I can highly encourage you to try this out and to work with this in a creative way and make it work in the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your
One last aspect I forget, stabilization is another important aspect as well. So some cameras have a stabilization included already, which is very helpful. Non-stabilized shots are normally a very, very painful thing. Like when you're having movement from a head camera and it's like shaking and the camera guy is using his head as well, that's not useful at all. So make a wise decision on a camera that is already stabilizing the image inside, or a post-production tool that does it for you afterwards. But yeah.
Yeah, very important. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your tips.
Welcome. Yeah. Anything else? Nope. So perhaps I go a little bit more into the interactivity as well, because I scratched that topic, and I think that's quite important because you make a decision in that moment how to distribute your project through, for example, video, or as a simple linear 360 video, which for many people who are coming from documentaries are appreciating a lot, that they just get a story told, or that they get addressed more than in a 16:9 documentary when they are doing it in VR, but they do not even want to interact, because in that moment it starts for them to feel a little bit more like a game, or they are dealing with the technology much more. They are feeling the technology. Each time they are using the controller and have to think, do I use the middle finger or the trigger or whatever? It brings them to the technology. So this is the first thing you have to consider if you're thinking about having a linear 360 documentary or an interactive one. Then, but as I said, a lot of people using VR headsets are coming from a games perspective, and then we are in a generation, or people in their 40s are from a generation, they grew up with games, and even if they are into documentaries, they can squeeze it both together, or they like to have something that is having an impact and a serious topic, but some interactivity, some playful things as well to lighten it a little bit, or give you the feeling of being able to interact with things and investigate on stories in a way what interests you, and not, like this. So it might be helpful to think about that in the very beginning, and then investigate on game engines like Unity, for example. Unity is available for free as long as you're just documentary filmmaker, if you do not have the revenue of a big studio. Same applies for Unreal, which is a little bit more complicated for most people. So that's why a lot of people I know who are using it because they cannot afford a developer, for example, who are diving into Unity, download it for free and play around with that. There's tons of tutorials out there. And you can very simply work with Unity to bring some interactivity into your projects. While doing that, of course, you are as well forced to build an APK or an interactive version out of your project, which you cannot distribute through YouTube anymore. So then you have to talk much more, or you have to think much more, and you have to talk to platforms that are distributing these kind of projects. And you might block yourself from distribution from some platforms as well, as, for example, Oculus was not a fan of video wrappers. So apps that have been just wrapping one single video inside of it. And so you have to be a little bit careful with if you're thinking about, okay, afterwards I want to go to Steam and Oculus and everywhere, but you have only created an app that has 5 linear videos in a not very interactive but a little bit interactive way. You might not be able to distribute it that way. So without making it too complicated for you right now, I would only encourage you to think about that first, and perhaps try out projects like this. And that's definitely helpful anyway, to get a headset and try out as much as possible what kind of different formats are already available, and what might be ideas that you could consider for your documentary as well. There are tons out there of projects and of interactive projects as well. So something you should not start considering when you are at the end of your project, or when you edited everything and recognize that linear work perhaps is not suitable for the project. Yeah.
Can you tell us, please, about most interactive project that you made? Which interactive you do?
I didn't hear the end. Sorry.
What interactive you do?
Yeah, I mean, I already scratched this topic with African Space Makers, for example, where a lot of interactivity is inside, or the project that where I have the background from here, which was called The Future of VR. We are working on dance games, for example, that are full interactive, that are completely done in Unity or in a games engine.
You can walk there, or what? What is interactivity? You can walk there, or what?
Yeah. So, for example, for the platform that we are creating, this is a full interactive thing where you can walk, where you can teleport yourself. It depends, as we are agnostic for the hardware. We have already built for Windows and Mac use, so you can walk around by using the WASD keys or the arrow keys, but you can walk around in VR as well by teleporting through the controller. Or using your wristband, where you can teleport directly to different rooms. If you run into other people, there will be a circle created around you, where, depending on the build and so on, let's say like a bunch of people, perhaps 10 people, can stand in the circle and talk to each other as well. So you have not only the option of movement, but you have the option of communicating. Of course, we have a text chat function in there as well, but text chats are very inconvenient for VR. So there we use this option of having a voice chat where you can talk to people. You can play back.
Sorry for this. How many points or staying you do?
It's totally dependent on the conference. You can it's totally free to walk, and so you can have in a build that is not that big regarding like textures of the room and so on. Let's say you can be there with more than 100 people, and all of them can create voice circles around them with up to 6 or 10, that's to be defined, people. It's a lot of different aspects that come together that define how many people can be in one room, and how many people can be in one voice circle to talk to each other. In general, you would normally say if there's a need of having more people in that room than would fit in there, you're just creating another instance of that room. So you have like this room twice or 3 times or 4 times, you mirror it. And then when one room is full, the others will enter the other room. So they have the same environment, the same functionalities, but and that's exactly the moment when you start using the virtual reality environments to add on something that you cannot create in reality. I mean, in reality, if a room is full, if the discotheque is full, you cannot enter it anymore. So you would just copy the discotheque and another dance floor, and you have space for another 1,000 people, and that's exactly what we are doing there. Of course, we have to deal with a little bit with some constraints. You have to deal with bandwidth and so on, but there's a lot of things that can be solved, and there's a lot of people working on solving the other things right now and bringing more people into the virtual world. There's free tools as well, like Mozilla Hubs offers some things like that freely as well, but there you are limited to 20 or 30 people. It depends a little bit as well on the build. And of course, it is very accessible through a browser on the one end, but it has very limited functionalities and ends up with, yeah, you're again in a something that feels like being in a Linux environment and so on. So you need a little bit of open-mindedness for not being in an Apple environment where you install something and it just works. Let's say like that, which is okay if it's free. Yeah, so yeah, we are working on complete interactive projects that are so interactive that we even try to bring interactivity in that we don't know about yet as well, like haptical vests or haptical feedback stuff. What we don't do so much, we've played around a little bit with that, is smells. You know, you can integrate smell as well into VR. I personally did not like what I experienced until now. Like some of the smells stay too long in the room. They don't disappear quick enough that if you want to add it into a next scene or something that is not related to that smell anymore and you still have it in the room, it's odd. And then there's a lot of smells that do not smell natural, but very, very chemical. They don't work at all for me. They interrupt the immersion as well, often. Yeah.
How many kind of interactivity we have now?
You are speaking about like 3DOF or 6DOF? Is that the question where you're aiming for?
Hmm?
Are you aiming for like 3 degree of freedom, 6 degree of freedom, like this kind of?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we are separating normally. That means 3DOF and 6DOF. That's how the short form. You will step into it, which means DOF stands for degree of freedom. 3 degree of freedom are related to headsets like the Oculus Go, for example, or Google Cardboards, where you can swivel around and look up and down and so on. You have one controller where you can aim at points and select them, but you are not moving in a room. 6 degree of freedom means that you are that you have headsets like an Oculus Quest, for example, or Oculus Rift, or HTC Vive, or Pimax, or whatever, where you have inside-out tracking or outside-in tracking systems that not only identify if you're swiveling around while sitting on a chair, but moving around in the room as well, which means you are in a room scale environment as well. So there you can move yourself in a room, turn around in a room, and select things with a controller, or normally even with 2 controllers. And where we are going right now even more is having even more than 2 controllers. Like HTC just introduced an add-on for the Vive that tracks your face, for example, that you can control things with, or that your mouse is tracked, for example, and if you're speaking, your virtual avatar will be displayed like that as well. But same applies for example, you can see more and more dance contests in VR chat, for example, where people track their feet and their legs and so on, and do like breakdance battles in VR. So that's something that can only be done in a 6 degree of freedom environment. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, we can talk for forever and days and go through all the projects with all the constraints. But I think we went through a lot here right now, technology-wise, but as well creative-wise. And if there are no more questions, I could always offer to get in touch with us, to send an email. And if it's just a short question, we're always happy to answer them and support and help. Otherwise, I would.
We have 10 minutes.
Oh, we have 10 minutes left. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about if I can go into one more project that we have been working on, but I'm not sure if I'll find a link to that so quickly. Let me check. If there's another question, feel free. While I'm looking for a link here.
We thinking how much point we need in our film, how much point of view, how much point walking. It's.
I think I do not 100% understand the question. How many points of view you need?
Yeah. How is mostly in your experience you do point of view?
Well, either we stick to one point of view, and the point of view is always yourself, which means like we take you to a journey where yourself are just an observer of something, and where you travel to places that you cannot visit, like this or something. So, but that's very like you are once established as the protagonist that is spoken to, and it stays like that. Even in the documentary, what I said with the background here, it's really you are addressed. They are talking to you as a person, and so there's no need of switching the perspective during the project. Of course, in projects where you want to encourage people to look at things from a different perspective, like I think Olga was her name, asked for in her project. You can do that, but I would not encourage to do that too often, because people are getting people are not used to watch things in VR right now. So that's why there was this rule of sticking to 15 minutes maximum, because otherwise people get get tired from having these headsets on. And back in the days when they have been bigger and more clunky, they felt the weight of it, and you started to the lenses get foggy and stuff. So this is a little bit outdated. I think people are getting more used to it, so you can have longer formats in there. But even if you're thinking about half an hour or 15 minutes, you have to think twice how often you can switch perspectives in there and establish this as something where people still understand, where am I, who am I here, what's my perspective. So I think you have to be careful with that. But you can, on the other hand, you can do that very very well to show up different perspectives on things. So as said, in African Space Makers, we have this male and female perspective, for example. You choose it once, and then for the storytelling element, it is a little bit important to stick to that perspective, to this gender perspective, and make once the whole story from that perspective, and not jump always between the one and the other. If you do that, the whole project takes you about an hour. It's 50 minutes of video, but then you have these moments when you select something and so on, and the introduction and so on. So it's about an hour that you're watching at the piece from one perspective. And so it really depends on the storytelling itself and on the content itself, if you can, if it makes sense, and if you make it more chaotic for the viewer, if you switch it more often. Perhaps as well here it helps a little bit if the perspective is really a different perspective. Like we did it once to encourage people to check how people who are sitting in a wheelchair are seeing things, and there it was very obvious when you are in the perspective of the person in the wheelchair, because you're always seeing things from a lower perspective, and you've seen the wheelchair around you. So there it's pretty clear. So it's again on how do you establish that, and how do you make it visible that you are changing the perspective. And my feeling is, again, connected a little bit to that people are not too much used to VR. A lot of people still have this wow effect when they put it on firstly, to give them a little bit of time to understand what they are in and to digest what they get told and what they should experience. That needs a little bit of time to do that. And so probably switching perspectives too often might kill this effect. Yeah, but it's very subjective again. It's very much into storytelling, and if you do it on purpose or do you do it by editing in a linear format. Yeah, funny wise, it was for a while. It was something a lot of people did as well, to play around with the motion signal thing as well. But as they knew, people are experiencing this 360 video through a chair where they are sitting in. People told stories from a wheelchair perspective. Sometimes it was more like a horror film, and sometimes it was more a documentary approach. But it was for a while, as I said in the beginning, we could see a lot of documentaries in the very beginning, because it was obvious that it makes sense to make documentaries in 360 and to be viewed in a VR headset. People did a lot in VR, in wheelchairs as well, and there you had the established movement as well, because you expected, if you're in a wheelchair, that the wheelchair will move at a certain point. So there's a lot of stuff to find from that perspective, for example. Yeah. Now I stopped searching for the. No, unfortunately, I don't have this one. We did a documentary that would fit in here as well, but I don't have the videos online on YouTube, unfortunately, which is telling the same story from two different perspectives from people working on a cargo ship. So we went for 10 days on a cargo ship, and we had, interesting wise, one Ukrainian seaman who told his story. And we had one guy from the Philippines who told his story. And it's a very interesting thing, because it is linear, it's not interactive at all. It's very static. We are always having the camera somewhere next to the protagonist, and you feel more like someone who's on the boat with the real protagonist and listening to a story, listening to his thoughts much more, because the people are not talking to the camera, they are sitting there or standing there and doing the things that they are doing normally. And as you can imagine, on a freight ship on the open sea, you can stand there for 5 minutes and everything is moving, there's happening a lot, but on the other hand, there's nothing happening, there's not even land in sight or something. So then the protagonist's voice is talking over the video. And after a very short time, you're not even recognizing anymore if he's talking into the camera or not. You're seeing this person, you are hearing the voice, you are hearing the story, and you start to create your own images about what the images that maybe are the images that are happening in his mind as well. So this is an interesting approach as well, to be the bystander who gets the story told, and really like that. In my eyes, it worked very well here, because it was reasonable to not move the camera, to have very long standing static shots that might be boring in other situations, but that's how it is on a ship like that. It's not too much happening at all. I mean, you have all the time, you have work and you have routines and so on, but you can stand there for hours and look into the open sea as well. Where nothing happens. Let's see if I have, perhaps if I Google it, if I can find a trailer for that. It doesn't look like. Not that quickly. But that's perfect project as well for, as an example for bringing people to spaces where they would not go on their own, or that they always wanted to do, like having like going on a ship, experiencing once to travel over the Atlantic Ocean with a ship from UK to US, for example, but cannot do. I think this is a documentary that gives a lot of viewers the option to at least experience it virtually and get the feeling for if it's perhaps a little bit of a romantic vision of how this would be for 10 days on a boat and what the reality looks like in a way. And if 15 minutes in VR are not already covering the wish of having that experience, that's definitely something you could think about or take into account when you're thinking about topics. Where would you want to go? Where do you know people would want to go but are not able to go for any reason, even if it's just for comfort reasons, that they wouldn't go there in the end. Stuff that we see as well on the ISS. I mean, they're shooting cameras to the ISS to record spacewalks in a documentary format, just for the reason that people are curious, people are interested in seeing that. It is space, but it's not science fiction, it's reality. It's not too much happening up there. Sometimes it's for days nothing is happening there, or very small experiments, but people are keen on taking a look and checking and how our planet is looking from up there and so on. So very static, but very interesting as well.
Okay, I think we can finish. So it's really, I don't know, big data.
Yeah.
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 Thanks so much. Happy to have you. Yeah.
My pleasure. And have a nice Easter weekend.
Yeah, nice Easter.
Stay well and good luck with your documentaries. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.